Good morning to everyone. I'd like to thank the organization committee to invite me here to present my research findings. So my topic is regulatory reforms in 21st century in different countries of the world, and I'd like to see how successful these regulatory changes are. So we are familiar with these events in the last decade or so. You see high-profile corporate scandals happen around the world, in particular in the developed countries. And that we seem to be a failure of regulatory regime that existed in those countries. So those big scandals were responded by the countries because of the weaknesses in the regulations. And the question may arise why those scandals happened, and those also had a big impact in most of the developed countries as well as developing ones. So scandals relates to the conflict of interest between different parties involved in the corporate sector. In other words, I can say this is a non-aligned interest between the parties. This is non-stewardship of the managers working for the corporate sector, and that's why we can see there are irregularities, there are manipulations, there are financial frauds in the corporate sector, although we have regulations in place. So in my research, I mainly highlight two different types of regulations, although we know regulations are widespread and regulations are in our everyday life. So this research is only to regulations in corporate sector, in particular corporate governance and disclosure related market regulations. We know these are very popular topic since 2001, when corporate collapse started to happen, starting from the US and then spread it in other parts of the world. So the responses to the regulations are very prompt by those developed economies, and later on some regulations are followed by other developed and emerging countries, including the ASEAN. Therefore, it is a research interest to see how successful those regulatory reforms have been in those OECD countries in relation to constraining the irregularities and the associated costs in the corporate sector. So I selected 4 countries in this research, and these 4 countries are the developed countries, and they belong to OECD economies, and 2 countries are Australia and New Zealand, and the other 2 is UK and Italy. So to conduct my research, I'd like to see whether we can answer these questions. Whether through regulation we are able to discipline managerial behavior, and we can reduce direct agency costs to improve the corporate sector and prosperity of the economy. And the answer may be yes or law. Then another question is about indirect cost in the corporate sector, and that we call earnings management risk. So I'm interested to see whether the earnings management risk is reduced in the post-2001 regulatory period as compared to the pre-2001 period. And finally, I'd like to see whether we need to replicate the same regulations in every country, irrespective of developed or developing countries. So some of the highlights of the regulation in corporate governance in different countries of the world. Obviously Act, we know it, in 2002 in response to Enron and other corporate collapse, and then Combined Code of Governance in UK, then Good Principle Governance and Best Practices in Australia, and Codes and Principles in New Zealand, Corporate Governance Code in Italy, and also corporate governance reforms in other countries, including Thailand. So in Thailand, I know 2002, year 2002 was declared as a good governance year. So looking at the regulatory reforms, the main change in the accounting standards that we have now around the world in more than 120 countries. So it's about accounting standards. Nearly 12,000 companies are following in all over the world, and 90 countries adopted this regulation in full. And we also see some convergence of disclosure between the largest economy of the world, the US, and the rest of the world. So these regulations are valuable. However, the question still remains how successful they are, whether they are effective in all the countries, or whether they are more successful in some countries than others. So there's the motivation of this research. So we know corporate scandals are common, and corporate fraud or manipulations are widespread because corporate executives' interest may be different from the interest of the common shareholders and investors and other stakeholders in the company. And since managers have residual control over the company and they have the power to direct the company in their best interest, so sometimes they deviate to serve the interest of the investors, of the owners of the company and other parties. So that's why we see managers' motivation may relate to these items. They may try for the existence of the firm's explicit and implicit contracts, or maximize their own compensation and bonuses, and then they try to avoid some debt constraints. They try to meet and beat market analysts' forecast or the target set by the top management, and they try to maximize the proceeds of their capital offerings. Okay? So they try to provide more information that attract investors to invest in their company. So looking at the research in these 4 countries, it seems some of the common law countries they are better than the European countries. Those have code law. So that's why we can see how regulation worked in these 4 countries. And our evidence show that on the UK and Italy companies, the level of earnings management it has been reduced more significantly in Italy than in the UK. And then on the Australian and New Zealand companies, we see earnings management behavior has not declined at all in the post-regulatory period. It rather increased to some extent. And finally, on the New Zealand companies, we see some of the proxies of the cost relating to the New Zealand companies. They are experiencing more cost than the US counterparts. However, the cost is lower than the Australian companies. So we can see the regulations are in effect in all these countries, and most of the regulations are similar types, but they are not similarly effective in all these countries. So regulation is more effective in the European countries. Those have a civil law regime than the common law economies like the UK, Australia, New Zealand. Therefore, we can say that having the same institutional and economic development, still there is a need to look at the country's specific characteristics. It's not necessary to replicate anything from one country to another, okay? Which means one size may not fit everyone. We need to look at country specific characteristics to enforce our regulations, and our corporate sector is already bestowed upon some of the regulations and their associated costs. So more regulations would be counterproductive in some cases. So our policymakers in Asia and other countries, in particular in the emerging economies, should be careful when they put forward new regulations in the corporate sector. We must look at the country characteristics, in-house features first, what is suitable for the country, and then go for regulations accordingly. There is no need to imitate everything from other developed countries, but it seems some of the regulations are not effective in those countries. So it's better to develop our own model of corporate governance or regulatory regime, okay, for the best interest of the respective countries' economic development. Thank you.